Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to call this meeting of the TRPA Environmental Improvement, Transportation and Public Outreach Committee to order. The date is Wednesday, April 25th, 2023, and it is 9:16, only a minute late. The first item on this agenda is to call the roll, and Kathleen or Myra, who's doing this?
Madam Chair, I'll
Yes.
take care of that. Ms. Conrad Seda,
Here.
Ms. Faustinos,
Here.
Mr. Friedrich,
Here.
Mr. Rice,
Here.
Mr. Settlemeyer,
Here.
Ms. Williamson.
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I will now go over the remote and in-person meeting rules for the day. For members of the public who are joining us remotely, please observe the meeting. To observe the meeting, however, go to trpa.gov under the calendar header. Click on Governing Board Hybrid Meeting for April 26, 2023. There you will find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. To address committee members directly with your comments, raise your hand in Zoom by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate agenda item. With your hand raised, you will be unmuted by TRPA staff and have 3 minutes to address the committee. If you have used the dial-in numbers to join us by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and be unmuted. For remote committee members, if you wish to speak, you can also now raise your hand in Zoom. You will find the hand icon at the bottom of your screen. Remote committee members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. Please, everyone, remember to mute your mic unless speaking to cut down on background noise. Finally, I would also like to ask that all remote members turn on their cameras if they are able. Members of the public who have joined us in person, please use the sign-in sheets at the back of the room to indicate which item you're interested in making comment on. At the appropriate time for public comment on the agenda item, please line up at the podium to speak. So there's a little bit different protocols here. Committee members who are in person, please raise your hand if you wish to comment and speak clearly into the microphone in front of you. If you are viewing the webinar on a personal computer, please ensure that your microphone and speakers are turned off to prevent audio feedback in the room. And next, we're going to move to approval of the agenda. Staff, are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Madam Chair.
Great. And now we will deem the agenda approved as posted, and we'll go on to the approval of minutes, which is item 2 on the agenda. We have a set of minutes from March 22nd, 2023 on page 11. Do any members of the committee wish to make any changes? No changes? Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Okay, great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. So now we're going on to our next agenda item 3, which is to recommend approval of the draft fiscal year 2023-24 Tahoe Regional Planning Agency Transportation Planning Overall Work Program, the OWP, which is a mouthful. Information can be found on page 239 of your packet. And for a presentation on this item, I'm going to turn it over to Kim Chevalier. Just having come back from France. I hope I pronounced that close. And then we'll have Michelle Glickert also present as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kimberly Chevalier for the record. I'm going to tee us up on all 4 of the agenda items we have today before we get into Michelle's presentation. So we've got 4 different items today, and they all have a theme of funding our regional transportation plan. So as the MPO here, we have a role in planning and policy and all of that important stuff that gets us to implementation. But we also have a really important role in tracking and awarding funding for our top priority projects. So that's the theme of the 4. The first 3 are going to be action. The last one's going to be informational. The first presentation is going to be from Michelle Glickert, and she's going to give the overview of the Transportation Planning Overall Work Program, OWP. And the OWP is the budget and detailed work plan for the MPO's planning priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. And we will be seeking a resolution on approving that. Second and third, we're going to have Judy Weber present. First, she'll be covering the Federal Transportation Improvement Program, or we like to call it the FTIP. And this is an administrative action, but it's also a really critical, important programming step to document the recently awarded funding for RTP transportation projects so they can move to implementation. And then Judy will cover the projects up for award through our regional grant program. So as the MPO, we integrate multiple funding sources all together and bundle them into one grant program, and we award funding every 2 years. So that kind of gets you a one-stop shop to give more meaningful awards to projects and a little less administrative burden, so you're not having to do multiple grant programs for smaller amounts. So Judy will cover all of those projects. And then last up, Nick Haven's going to present on the long-term funding strategy for the RTP, which is filling the $20 million a year funding gap. We've developed the 777 strategy. I think you're mostly aware of that as a collaborative partnership between federal, state, and local to fill that gap. So Nick's going to give you an update on the tracking and where we're at on that. And I'll just end, traditionally, a lot of times we took these funding items to the operations committee. But so this is the first time we're bringing it over to the EIPTO committee, because this is really instrumental in our role as the MPO. So some of these are new and we'll give you informational background on those. But we're hoping to cover all 4 today, and I'll hand it over to Michelle.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. Michelle Glickert for the record. I'm the Transportation Planning Program Manager, and today I'm seeking the committee's recommendation of approval on the 23-24 Tahoe Metropolitan. Oh, this is going to be a tough one. I've been struggling this week. I don't know what kind of, it's just been a busy week. Tahoe Metropolitan Planning Organization Overall Work Program. So we often refer to that as the TMPO, the Tahoe Metropolitan Planning Organization, and the Overall Work Program, the OWP. TRPA received the MPO designation over 20 years ago. The MPO role focuses on transportation planning and programming of funds. 3 primary products required as the MPO are the Regional Transportation Plan, the Federal Transportation Improvement Program, that's the FTIP that Judy's going to hit on next, and my item today, our OWP, the Annual Overall Work Program. Next slide. So the annual program of transportation planning work, referred to as our OWP, includes transportation planning priorities to be carried out during the fiscal year. The work program also describes the transportation planning activities serving as the budget and direction for the expenditure of various federal and state transportation planning funds. This is sort of our accounting document on those grant funds that we receive. The OWP is the transportation planning team's management tool, identifying what we've accomplished and new tasks for the next year. All of these tasks fold into the overall TRPA operations work program and initiatives that Chief Operating Officer John Hester develops each year. So we coordinate with him on each of these documents. Our primary revenue sources for the OWP transportation planning and administration is provided by Federal Highways Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. These funds are awarded to TRPA, acting as the designated MPO to fulfill core planning activities. So I'll be going over those in a minute. Federal sources, for this next fiscal year, the budget remained about the same as our current budget at $2.3 million. This includes staff time plus benefits, about 6 full-time staff total. We incorporate others part-time from the TRPA Long Range Environmental Improvement Program, Research and Analysis, and the Communications Division. They help us deliver all the requirements as the MPO. The budget includes direct costs for future and existing contracts and data purchases. Next slide. So let's begin. WE here on the screen is for work element. These 3 work elements make up outreach and administration. 101 is dedicated to administration of the program. It's staff development, essentially building the program each year. This includes our quarterly progress reports, the products and the tasks that we've achieved, and we submit this each quarter to the DOT and FHWA. Transportation Development Act is a major source of regional transit operating funds from California. This work element is dedicated for staff under the TMPO authority. They work to complete the administration and management of the funds, which entails working with each of our transit agencies. We conduct unmet transit needs outreach and preparation of a report. It's also monitoring the productivity and efficiency of transit. This element includes contract funds for financial auditing, et cetera. The public outreach up next on collaboration with our partner agencies. This is key to our success. While our overall budget sources do not increase, we do move funds around within the work elements, especially in work element 103. We sometimes are updating plans more heavily, like this year as we prepare for the RTP. So we flex that budget to increase in 103. This also includes things like e-news and social media preparation. A big item coming up is our public participation plan. So this is one of those MPO requirements, laying out the process for outreach to the community and public comment timeframes for various planning documents. We're very proud of our work. We reaching various communities within Tahoe, and we do continue to receive call outs on our plan. We're going to be updating that and doing even better. We even recently were asked to represent at a national conference. So we're really excited to update that and incorporate some of the equity work that we're doing right now. In 103, this is also about the TMPO, Tahoe Transportation Commission support, the TTC, that they meet under the TTD. The TTC support is really important. That's where we often hold our public committee meeting. I'm sorry, not committee meeting, what I'm trying to say. Yeah, public hearings, forgive me. We also have tribal government consultation, working with our federal partners, land managers, and environmental justice activities. Next slide. Within regional intermodal planning is work element 104. Regional intermodal planning includes a variety of transportation planning activities that support the development and maintenance of regional transportation policy documents. That includes the regional transportation plan, our new transportation equity plan, and this element, the most largest in our program, includes safety planning, updating that with a Vision Zero strategy. You guys have been hearing that at this committee. Next fiscal year, we'll have a final active transportation plan that will include connections to our dirt trails, complete streets, communities, and policy recommendations for new mobility services and e-bikes. This element identifies transit planning support that includes staff support and money for passenger surveys, continued participation with our local transit operators on their transit plans. This is for both the North and the South Shore. Also supporting planning for congestion management and a recreation corridor, regional park and ride development, and public-private partnerships providing micro transit. Additionally, staff's going to continue to be a key stakeholder in US 50 East Corridor Plan, our SR 89 Corridor Plan advancements, and Washoe County Tahoe Transportation Plan recommendations, as well as that support on implementing the SR 28 Corridor improvements. You'll be hearing about that as well. Also in regional intermodal planning, next slide, is work element 105. This includes regional transportation data collection and modeling efforts that supports transportation data needs of staff, partners, and the general public. Maintaining Lake Tahoe info, transportation data with various transportation data sets, updating those on a regular basis. TRPA does have federal and state requirements as well on those data needs. This element includes bike, ped, transit data monitoring, and model infrastructure updates. A great resource for our partner agencies and the public. And this year, as we continue that regional transportation plan development, we'll be focusing on updating with the best available data we have as we better understand types of travelers, those coming from afar, staying here, living here, working here. This is a part of the preparation for the next cycle, again, for that regional transportation plan. So moving into tracking and financial management, which we are going to hear more about today. Maintenance and updates to the programming documents such as the FTIP and also the Regional Transportation Implementation Plan. It also includes participation on our bi-state regional planning working groups, federal programming working groups, grant programs that we administer like the regional grant program. We talked about that. You're going to be hearing about that next as well. All of those that our state and federal partners administer. Additional ongoing tasks include just project tracking and utilizing the Lake Tahoe EIP tracker. Next slide. So under regional coordination, that's work element 107, performance-based planning includes that continually building out our performance management process. So that's the data-driven decision-making. This relates to programming of funds for projects, project selection and sequencing, and policy development. This element includes the biennial transportation reports and adaptively managing the program. We brought that to you last month. This element includes supporting federal performance measure goals for improving safety, which is supported by the update of our safety strategy, Vision Zero, right now underway. And last but not least, work element 108 is sustainable communities planning, funded by California SB1. This furthers the RTP SES strategy to reduce GHG and VMT. This past year, with a large focus on sustainable funding, the initiative, we completed the Transportation Action Plan, identifying priority projects to advance in Tahoe. We're going to continue that work, and Nick's going to be talking about that with stakeholders and decision-making outreach on new funding mechanisms, identifying new funding sources. We're going to complete an update to our electrical vehicle readiness plan and updates to infrastructure that will include like future locations and considering universal charging. We also want to consider evaluating regional parking management options and transportation technology advancements in a new transportation system management operations report. All of these documents will be coming through this committee. Parking management is a key in our town centers as well as the instrumental in our recreation corridors. Next slide. So to date, we've received about four comments, a few pertinent to the work program and a few less requiring no changes. General updates to the document. I built out a better description of the study we proposed to initiate on transportation system management and operations. I had a small revision required from NDOT to our budget. We had to reduce that for about $20,000. As we prepare this work program each year, it really begins in February and we're estimating budgets. So sometimes there's some adjustments that have to be made, and committee members and organization chart within our document, we updated that, and we had a few minor text edits. Comments received requiring no changes. We received one comment regarding the corridor planning for US 50, not in favor of the current proposed lane reduction areas. There's been no decision on that final configuration. I have forwarded the comment to the project planning team. However, no changes are proposed to the work program. As the comment is related to the project design, staff will continue to participate. I mentioned that earlier in the planning process for this essential transportation corridor. There'll be more opportunities as well for the public to engage in project design this year. We received some feedback on the public process and future public participation plan. So that was timely, as we're going to be updating that plan later this year. However, no changes again to the work program. And lastly, from an incline resident, they shared their sentiment that we don't align with some of the incline residents on our regional vision. And again, as we prepare for the next regional transportation plan, we'll be taking that comment and making sure those public comments are built into that process. So I shared that internally, but however, again, no changes to our work program this next fiscal year. Next slide. So a quick review of our schedule. The public comment closed on the 5th of April. That provided over 30 days for public comments. We've addressed all comments received. I just noted those and can incorporate any from you today for our final action. We'll then send our final OWP to our state and federal partners. That's prior to May 15th, our submittal deadline. So Madam Chair, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle and Kim, for these overview presentations. Clearly an awesome amount of work goes into this, and a lot of information that you've been able to succinctly convey in a way that is much appreciated. So I'd like to open it up for any comments from any of our committee members. I think everyone now is in the room. Okay, Mr. Friedland.
Thanks for the presentation. On the sustainable communities portion, the EV readiness plan, just any comments on planning that's happening for transit electrification? This kind of also relates to an upcoming FTIP item, but.
Oh, pardon. Yeah, absolutely. Judy's going to be hitting on a proposal that was received in the regional grant program regarding that. Is that what? Sorry.
Yeah, Nick Haven for the record. So the Tahoe Transportation District actually was awarded this year an EV planning grant. So they're actually going to be doing a pretty significant look at transit electrification. So that includes not only like charging locations, but they're actually having quite an issue with procuring electric transit vehicles. They've actually had to cancel one order because a vendor went out of business. And so I think getting the landscape on how you can actually electrify transit is something that TTD is actually embarking on right now. I think they just selected a vendor, I want to say a few months back. So that is forthcoming. And I think that information will be valuable for not just TTD operations, but the other operators around the lake.
Any further questions? I'll just make one comment, and that is that, I mean, obviously, this is a very voluminous, comprehensive analysis. And one of the things that stood out to me that it would be helpful for future presentations is the budget items aligned with each of the programmatic objectives. I know in our review of this, and it's obviously very well documented in the staff report. One of the things that stood out to me was that it seems that there's probably a lot of staff time that goes into administering the public outreach component, because when you look at the public outreach budget, it looks, somewhat small in relationship to all the other work. And I know that, comprehensive job is being done by staff in the public outreach component. So I think that it might be good to break down where staff allocates their time to each of the work program objectives so that we have an idea of how you're allocating those resources and can get, and also for the public to have a more comprehensive picture of how resources are allocated to each of those components. So again, I think it's all there. It's just about moving around the presentation.
Buried a little bit in that document. Yeah, happy to bring that up in the presentation and even the executive summary,
That'd be great.
which would help next year.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. So any further questions, comments? Go ahead.
Thanks, Belinda. I guess on a similar note, perhaps you could just kind of reiterate the extent to which staff will be implementing portions or spending time on implementing portions of the transportation priority, the transportation action plan, like which projects they're in. That's one question.
I was gonna.
Sure. Nick Haven again. Yeah, so we're heavily involved in coordinating projects. TRPA doesn't deliver projects per se. However, we're very instrumental in coordinating kind of the sequencing and timing of projects, as well as the pursuit even of funding, because we live in a world, right, of discretionary grants, and I'll get into that in my presentation. And so coordinating what comes out of the region from multiple partners is extremely important in order to ensure some success in those discretionary programs. And that's the role that TRPA plays. TRPA tries to help coordinate and support a lot of those funding requests for those projects and help kind of smooth the timing of many of those, if not all of those projects in the action plan. And that's kind of TRPA's role.
Yeah. I would just note for the record, we still have in the action plan, the South Shore Community Revitalization Project, which of course includes, as was noted in the overall work program, a reference to the 1980 regional plan had the loop road in there, as the city of South Lake Tahoe has taken a position against running that road through the neighborhood and just moving forward with the housing project on that former alignment. So at some point, it would be good to reflect that.
Yeah, that should be reflected in the document that project has morphed into essentially a Nevada Elements project. Okay, so just to be clear on the record that the project that's reflected in the action plan is really just the Nevada elements. There's still viable elements that stand alone without the balance of the other elements in California.
Yeah, good. That was my understanding, but just for the record, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, if there's no further committee comments, we'll go to the public hearing portion. So if any member of the public wishes to address the Environmental Improvement, Transportation, and Public Outreach Committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand now, either by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. So do we have any people in the room that would like to speak? Please come to the podium.
There we go. regarding the TTD and public comments in the past. I don't know if you were there or aware, but last week there was a presentation to the public for the first time of the hubs that are proposed, in particular, not actually claiming a spot for the hub. However, TTD has purchased the old elementary school, which I'm sure aware of. And at that meeting, there were probably 75 people holding signs that said no to that proposal. And the overall sentiment was no hub in Incline Village at all. And that was literally 70 people there. So there are two things that are concerning. One is that that property is purchased. And number two, by the TTD with the assistance of TRPA. And when I spoke to one of the presenters, I said, so if you're not committed to a site, why did you purchase that? And he said, well, we can transfer that ownership, which to me implies that with interagency relationships, the best thing to do, which I've heard from Washoe County School District, is to transfer within the agencies. And that presents a problem because just recently, the Washoe County School District just basically condemned one of our schools, the elementary school. The middle school. And I don't know why, other than they're saying the population is going down when in fact it is going up. We've got 200 more youths in town, which is a lot for Incline. So that to me is concerning in that I'd hate to see the old elementary school, which TTD owns, get transferred to the middle school because its interagency relationship is so prominent. So I would just like to say regarding public comment, I'm sure that might have changed since you had that last meeting to 70 people who would have. And secondarily, please keep your eye out for some sort of interagency problem that might arise from the condemning of the old elementary school property, which is already owned by TTD, and transferring to another school. That just seems kind of sad for Incline Village. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public here on the room? Okay, if not, Catherine, do we have anyone online?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment on this item.
Thank you. Okay, so if we could then close the public comment period, and I can ask again if there are any further comments from the committee members. No? Okay. Then we need to entertain a motion, and I think if we can get the motion up on the screen, we'll see if we have someone who's willing to make a motion on this item.
Sure, I'll make the motion. Move that we request that Tahoe Metropolitan Planning Organization approve draft fiscal year 2023-24 TRPA TMPO Transportation Planning Overall Work Program.
We have a motion. Any discussion from the committee? Comments or questions? Right. Okay, Mariah, you want to go ahead and call the roll?
Ms. Conrad Seda,
Yes.
Mr. Rice,
Yes.
Mr. Friedrich,
Yes.
Mr. Settlemyer, Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Faustinos.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Great. We're now on to then agenda item number 4, which is to recommend approval of the 2023 Federal Transportation Improvement Program, FTP Amendment number 1. And information on this item can be found on page 259 of your packet. And we're going to pass this along to Judy Weber to make a presentation. Welcome, Judy.
So thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and fellow board members. Judy Weber, TRPA Transportation Planner. So as Michelle and Kim mentioned, I'll be covering a funding program action for the Amendment 1 to the 2023 Federal Transportation Improvement Program, which is the FTIP. So to get you familiar with the FTIP, this slide shows the progression of the FTIP project. It all begins in the Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP, identifying the projects and programs that are needed to improve Tahoe's transportation system. Once identified in the RTP project list, which is updated every 4 years, and the last update was April 2021, the project can apply for federal funding. When funding is awarded, to move the project forward, it must be programmed into the FTIP. If the project has revisions such as increased funding or scope changes, this must be made through an amendment. So today we have 6 projects being amended into the 2023 FTIP, and the full document was updated last year. So the FTIP is the short-term programming document that implements projects in the long-term regional transportation plan. It contains projects that have been vetted through the RTP process, are ready for implementation, and are anywhere from environmental to the construction phase. These projects have received federal funds, are regionally significant, or require a federal action. So the FTIP must be financially constrained, and this just means that the amount of dollars programmed to the projects must not exceed the dollars estimated to be available. TMPO updates this document every 2 years, and you may recall the 2023 FTIP was adopted by the board last September. So as the MPO, our responsibility is to program and maintain the funding in the document. Once a project is programmed, it allows for the implementer to move forward with the authorization of funds and to proceed with work on the project. Throughout the 4-year cycle, there may be revisions to existing projects or projects that have been awarded funds that need to be amended into the document. The MPO implementer, the project implementer notifies the MPO of these updates through our EIP transportation tracker, and these updates may require an amendment. So an amendment is a major change to the FTIP. It can include funding updates greater than 50% of the project cost, scope changes, or adding or deleting a project. Amendments are processed as needed, and they do require governing board approval and the state and federal approval. Next slide, please. So Amendment 1 includes 6 Nevada projects. It adds 2 additional SR 28 projects and updates 2 existing 28 Central Corridor projects and a couple others. So I'll go ahead and walk you through these projects. Next slide, please. So the map here displays the projects listed in the amendment. And I'll start off with the 2 SR 28 projects being added. So these projects will be NDOT led and will implement various elements of the SR 28 corridor management plan. The SR 28 East Shore Preservation, which is shown in blue here, runs along 28 from US 50 to the East Lakeshore Boulevard in Incline Village. It includes pavement rehabilitation, stormwater infrastructure improvements, and fiber conduit installation. The next project, again, NDOT led, is the Spooner Mobility Hub. This is shown in gray on the map. And I'm sorry, I hope you can see that map. I don't know if we can make it a little bigger if possible. This is near the intersection of 28 and US 50. It includes a transit mobility hub with 250 parking spaces, which were transferred from the existing Central Corridor Sand Harbor to Spooner project, and has a half a mile of multi-use trail and an AIS station. The next 2 projects are existing. They're 28 Central Corridor projects. These are TTD-led projects. Updates included title, scope, and a few funding updates. The Sand Harbor to Spooner, which was renamed based on the location, Sand Harbor to Thunderbird Cove. This is shown in yellow. And the mobility hub element, the 250 parking spaces, and $2 million in congressionally directed spending funds were transferred to the Spooner Mobility Hub that I just mentioned. And the Skunk Harbor parking element was removed. The updated scope now includes 1.7 miles of multi-use trail, vista pullouts, and safety improvements. The Chimney Beach to Secret Harbor, which was also renamed, this was renamed to Thunderbird Cove to Secret Harbor. This is shown in the orange. And this project received $2.4 million in SNPLMA funds through the U.S. Forest Service. It includes 0.9 miles of trail, restrooms, transit, and parking spaces. So the last 2 projects just had funding updates. So the TTD Transit Fleet and Administration Facility, it's shown here in brown, was awarded $2 million in congressionally directed spending. This project is currently moving forward with a master plan and site assessment. However, no location is determined yet, but one option is shown on the map. And that's at US 50 and Warrior Way. And then the last is Kale Drive Complete Street. This is shown in green. This project is now fully funded. It will be implemented by Douglas County, and it includes 0.5 miles of sidewalks, bike lanes, underground utilities, and stormwater drainage improvements. Next slide, please. So the amendment was noticed for a 7-day public comment period required by our TMPO public participation plan. We opened it on March 28th and closed it on April 5th. It was posted through the TRPA website in an email blast. We did hold a public hearing at the Tahoe Transportation Commission board meeting on April 5th. We did receive a few general comments. Those comments were updates to titles and funding, and these comments were addressed in the document, or these updates were made. And then a few additional comments requiring no changes, but they were more project specific and really geared towards the project implementer. Some of those questions were a suggestion to consider a parking reservation system for the corridor, a request for more information on the mobility hub, a specific question for Kale Complete Streets, and then just a general opposition to the SR 28 projects and the transit facility funding. So all these comments were recorded and forwarded to the implementer for follow-up. So next slide, please. So the next steps for the amendment is basically their approval process. Today, governing board approval for the amendment. Once this is adopted, the amendment packet will be submitted to the Nevada Department of Transportation, known as NDOT, for state approval. And we do send a courtesy copy to Caltrans. Once NDOT approves, they will transmit the packet to the Federal Highway Administration for the final approval. And that includes or gives inclusion into the statewide transportation improvement program for both California and Nevada states. So with that, today I'm asking for adoption of this amendment, and any comments, questions that I receive here today will be incorporated into the document prior to submitting.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive presentation. Do we have any comments from committee members at this point? Yeah.
You have yours.
Your valued opinions, however.
Well, questions and then a comment on the TTD fleet facility. So this, it mentions in the report this for 75 buses. This is the prospect here is to move the entire TTD bus fleet to this facility.
Correct, yes. As far as I understand, yes.
I would note that I think it's about 88% of TTD bus ridership is in the city of South Lake Tahoe, and this at Warrior Way, I just did a quick search, is about 8 miles from, say, the center of town, the community college. So that would be significant trips and BMT and emissions added from that, right?
Yes, so that is noted, and again, this is the location is not determined. I think TTD is definitely looking at this this site. So there's further discussion on this, and I think that also is a project implementer question that I can forward to them too.
Yeah, let me jump in there, Nick Haven. So yeah, TTD is kind of in an evaluation mode. Their current facility is just inadequate. And so they need a new facility for bus, basically their bus yard. And so they're undergoing, I know, a planning study right now to figure out what is a viable new location. And so I think that that's the phase that we're at right now. We had to program this congressionally designated spending funding in the TIP to make sure that we secured that funding for them. But I think that, ongoing dialogue with TTD would probably be appropriate in terms of where that location ends up kind of be, right? And so specifically. And so those conversations are definitely ongoing as that planning process evolves.
But the funding would be to look at a Douglas County facility, right? Not to look at anywhere in the South Shore or?
No, actually, it's their planning study that they're actually already embarked in. The congressionally designated spending funding is not, that's already funded, the planning effort. And so that is not limited to the Douglas County location.
So it could be anywhere on the South Shore.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or even off the hill.
Okay.
And so there's also considerations of because of workforce and other issues. I mean, they're even evaluating things down in the Carson Valley as well.
So I guess a question related to my previous question about studying electrification of transit. I didn't see that in the work plan here. I mean, as we know, at least in California, the innovative clean transit rule requires 100% zero emission purchases starting in 2029, 100% total fleet 2040. Seems like any bus facility anticipated should be not planning for buses of the past, but the buses of the future. I didn't see anything in there about charging infrastructure. It's this whole different service regime with electric buses, et cetera. So any comments on that?
Well, I think obviously we support transit electrification and we're seeing progression and movement there. But I think that's probably a dialogue with also a TTD specifically and other operators in the region, which we can help facilitate for sure. This programming action in front of you today is just really about the funding of and securing and documenting the funding that's been secured for a maintenance facility, the scope and the specifics of what that facility has at it is to be determined, right? And so we're definitely developing that. I think some TTD board members overlap here and can maybe speak to some of the electrification plans that TTD does have. They are definitely moving forward toward electrification.
What, and I guess I'm just looking at the item as it's described in the amendment, and it does say 2 million for a TTD fleet administration facility in Douglas County. So that just doesn't seem to square with the idea that we're looking at all locations.
Fair enough. I think we can look at modifying. I think we had to have some locational specific requirement in our programming. And so we can look at how we can maybe be a little more flexible on the location and better reflect where the planning activities are at right now.
Would that be then appropriate to make that change before we adopt it?
They are Nevada funds and so this is currently right now a Nevada project. We did, like Nick had explained, we did need to program these funds to secure them. So they came from the state of Nevada. So we could eliminate, I guess, Nevada County, but right now that is one potential site they are looking at.
Well, again, that just seems like kind of lock something in. And I just to point out that, I know the planning processes are underway with the TTD has the short range study. The city has the study we're doing with VIA. We're contemplating requesting future TDA funds for microtransit. I mean, that, like, again, 88% of the rides are in South Lake Tahoe, and it could be that more of those in the future are electric microtransit. That's certainly the goal of the city council. And so it may well be that there's a need for regional or Douglas County serving facility in Douglas County. That's all fine and good, but it may not, it just needs a little cart before the horse to commit funds to a specific location, given those factors, the planning factors, where the rides are happening, the fact that electric charging infrastructure is needed in to meet regulations, and I don't see that here. So I just have some problems of a kind of presupposing what the outcomes of these planning processes are going to be with kind of going in this direction.
I think we have one other comment here from the board, two comments actually. So did you want to go first, Shelley, or do we go to Cindy? Okay.
Well, serving on the Tahoe Transportation District Board, I think we're open to looking at all the solutions that are necessary. Wes, wouldn't you agree? And certainly this, the requirement on these funds and how we use these funds needs to be taken into consideration. I know on North Shore, we've had to move our TART facility quite a ways out of the Tahoe Basin in order to accommodate our bus fleet and the growth of that bus fleet. And of course, everything is looking at electrification or alternative fuels. We're also looking with micromass transit, whether we play a role in that or not, or if the city wants to take over the services on South Shore, we've talked about that as well. But we need facilities to take care of the buses. If we are going to get people out of their cars, we have to have adequate facilities to repair and maintain these, whatever fuel they use, whatever their service area. And while it's not ideal to have it out of the basin, it may be where the workforce is in the future unless we're able to, given the shortage of drivers. I would say, I think on North Shore, 100% of our drivers are coming from outside the basin to drive the buses that deal with our locals. So, and we're significantly short of drivers. And we just can't compete with the private sector for those jobs. So, but I do think that the FTIP is an important component. These are federal funds and we should move, go ahead and continue this process, and your representative on the TTD and El Dorado counties and Douglas counties can work together on how we best situate this for services at the South Lake Tahoe area.
So Dean and then Mr. Settlemeyer.
Thank you. My assumption is, with respect to John's comments, is that the Douglas County location is a perfect intercept lot for people coming up not only from Carson City and Douglas County, but potentially from Reno. And I think the objective is to intercept those cars, as soon as they reach the basin, so they can the passengers can transfer to buses to complete their trip.
That was a different project. This would be for the fleet maintenance.
Oh, the fleet
bus
maintenance,
barn,
okay. Okay.
like where they're domiciled and maintained.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah.
I apologize. My question had to do with the new project. I mean, most of these projects all contain a component of federal funding, but specifically item 5, which is the SR 28 East Shore Tahoe Preservation Program, is characterized as a federalized project. Can you explain that? Is it because of the amount of money that's coming from the National Highway Performance Program?
It stems from the funding source. Yes. So it's federal funds that need to be federal programmed in the FTIP so they can move forward with those funds.
So these are funds coming directly from the federal government and not through a local, one of the states. I mean, I'm just kind of, they all contain components of federal funding. So I'm just kind of curious why that was specifically a federalized project.
Those funds do, come from the federal government down through to the state, but
Right.
also it is a regional significant project, the SR 28 corridor. So the projects that have federal funding and are regionally significant do need to be included into the FTIP. And the dollar amount, the large dollar amount of funding.
So from a programmatic standpoint, I mean, what is the effect of having a federalized? Is it merely a matter of semantics?
This is Nick Haven. It's just the characterization of funding really drives whether it's federalized or not. And, federally funded projects have also other kind of strings attached in terms of reporting and other things. And so, for example, this project is money that NDOT gets from the federal government as a state, and they have chosen to apply it to this project. So they have to do reporting and things to Federal Highway Administration to deliver that project. And so it's considered a federal aid project on the state highway system.
So Nick, I guess I'm still a little confused. I mean, you look at project number 4, which is the SR 28 Spooner Mobility Hub. You've got funds coming from the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, from congressional direct spending. I mean, there are federal components in that as well. So that's why I asked the question.
Correct.
They all have federal components.
And that's
though.
considered a federal project as well.
Okay, but
in
not
terms of
federalized. What is the difference?
It is federalized. So if there is a dollar of federal transportation funding in a project, you assume all the responsibilities of carrying out the federal aid process in terms of reporting and all of the hoops you have to jump through with the Federal Highway Administration. So most every project in the FTIP is considered a federalized project.
Okay, I guess that was my question. This is the only project that had that specific language attached to it.
I see.
Anyway.
Yeah, sorry for that confusion.
Okay, Mr. Settlemyer.
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion and reminds me of last week when we had a discussion about the concept of approving additional allocation of space for the community college in California. And I, of course, raised the question, do Nevadans get to partake and, live in such dormitoriums? And the answer was no. So I can understand the concern. But in this situation, Nevada is putting forth some funding for that mobility hub. Maybe we can try to get both states to give more money in the future and have several mobility hubs because it will be necessary. I appreciate the concept of the EV. Nevada is trying to do our best to move to more electrification. However, I believe that our state is looking at it a little bit differently in the aspect that first we have to ensure that we have enough products to make these vehicles and enough products are available. And looking at the supply stream currently, I'm hesitant to believe that we'll have enough in order to do that. So we may still have to rely on diesel for a while longer, but I appreciate the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further comments from committee members? Mr. Weiss.
Madam Chair, I'm reluctant to jump into this one because Douglas County is going through some moral searching right here. How much should we fund microtransit? How far should it go into our state before we fund microtransit? But one thing that I want to remind everybody, I'm sure I don't have to remind you, is that dirt ain't cheap. And when we have the space available to do a mobility hub at Warrior Way, I think that we should do everything that we can to see that it happens. We're talking about BMTs. If we do go to electrification, I don't see where that would have a big impact on anything when we're running electric buses to get them to a place where they can be maintained. I don't see going that short distance into Nevada is going to be critical to any phase. So.
Mr. Friedrich.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say that just again, it's not a mobility hub we're talking about. This is where the buses are domiciled to maintain this particular item. And to Nick's point, that there's still evaluation happening about who runs what portion of the bus, what portion of microtransit. Does the city of South Lake Tahoe take some of that on? And then the regional service, what percentage of those are zero emission and on what timeline? Again, for the California side, it has to be 100% zero emission purchases starting in 2029 if we're to comply with the innovative clean transit fleet rule, et cetera. And obviously, if you have 16-mile round trip to Warrior Way from the community college, that if you have a battery, they have limited capacity and range, and so that just means you're charging them more and you're running them less, and it costs money to charge them. So there are consequences for having buses, whether you're fueling them with diesel or electrons. Further you have to travel, the more it costs and the more logistical hurdles you have. And so it's, again, it seems to me it well could be that it makes sense to have a facility at Warrior Way for regional or Nevada serving buses or the state line area, but it doesn't necessarily make sense to service microtransit or buses serving the Y or other places throughout South Tahoe where most of the ridership again is 88%. So it just seems to me it's and again the item says TTD Fleet Administration Facility in Douglas County for construction, acquisition, environmental design, and construction. So this is moving forward to presuppose that that's the best location. Again, when we have these other planning processes underway, including the need to plan for electrification, which is not called out in this facility. I don't see anything about electrical capacity, charging infrastructure. There's certainly other jurisdictions like Antelope Valley that have 100% zero emission buses right now, and they're putting their grant funding into infrastructure, renewable energy to offset it. It seems to me we should be going in that direction, and I don't see that in the works here. So again, I feel like this is premature relative to the planning that's underway, and maybe you could disavow me of that, but.
I just wanted to add, thank you, Mr. Friedrich. We appreciate that. Carl Hasty from the Tahoe Transportation District does want to come back to this committee, and I think we had said maybe June, to provide a thorough transit update on the transit planning efforts and on some future, and we can make sure that we can, save some time to talk directly about this as well.
Thanks. My question is, if we don't move forward on this item today, do we lose federal funding?
We don't lose federal funding. We would have to come back and secure the funding through an action in the next few months. However, there is actually some of the other projects are definitely time sensitive, the NDOT project and others. And so again, this document itself is more of an administrative financial document. The scope that's referenced is fairly limited, and the write-up that Mr. Friedrich is referencing is purposefully limited because there is a more robust project and process going on behind it. And so I would hope we can move forward with the item today as presented, with the understanding that it is clear and on the record that there is no location specified for the planning effort that's underway, and that a subsequent amendment in the future could be done to then better reflect the outcome of that planning.
I mean, Mr. Hasty is online if we want to hear from him directly as this is their project.
Okay. Yeah, I just had one, I guess, happy to hear Mr. Hasty, just thinking that we could potentially amend the language to be unspecific, or to note that this $2 million is being allocated in support of a planning process to identify the location, and we can take out Douglas County, just unless it has to be spent in Douglas County. But if it does not have to be spent there, then I would recommend we take out the specificity, and the motion to pass it includes an amendment. That would just be my recommendation. Because I mean, I agree, it may be that that's the best location, but it's true that, if there's an entire planning process to identify location, we should be more neutral in the language. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, do we lose Nevada funding then? I mean, I'm just curious, to Ashley's point, to Ms. Carmen's point, is there Nevada funding tied to this that has to include the words Douglas County in the motion?
Yeah, so this is Nick Haven again. So that's kind of the issue here, is that we have a existing congressionally designated spending award that has been made from Nevada. So we have Nevada funding at risk that we have to program into our TIP. And so, I mean, we can remove Douglas County. I don't know what that gets us, honestly, but we can remove the specificity of Douglas County. However, the projects in the TIP have to have some sort of locational reference to them. We can see about how much we can be flexible in terms of what will pass muster with the state and the federal government that has to approve this. But there are some basic requirements in terms of locational information.
Mr. Settlemyer.
I was just curious if we could ask our legal counsel if we just use Nevada. That way it appropriately indicates the money we spend in Nevada. I assume the congressional direct spending was just specific to the state of Nevada, maybe not specifically Douglas, and then that gives a little bit more flexibility. Or we could just lose funds. I don't care.
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say that South Shore serving transit maintenance would happen in Douglas County in Nevada, so that may be it. So it's more about where would be the ideal place to service diesel and then in the future electric or hydrogen buses when on the South Shore, when 88% of them are running around South Lake Tahoe. It might be, some at the Y where they are now at the Public Works Yard. It could be some at the college or whatever. But I'm just saying, if you had a planning process that was of a logical place to domicile and maintain buses, it seems like that's where your decision should come from there, not driven by the tail wagging the dog and the funding and saying, okay, we have some money, let's do something, even if it doesn't make sense. So that's my concern.
Mr. Marshall, did you want to address the question?
Not really. To be truthful.
Okay.
To be honest, Mr. Settlemeyer, your question has to do with the innards of, monetary policy and awarding of federal funds, which I will admit to you that I have not boned up to answer this particular question. I think what's important though is, the way that we amend the FTIP to add in projects so that money can be spent on these projects is first, it's gone through TTC as the recommending body to this body, which essentially is TTD. And they had a discussion about this, and I think the city's representative dissented, but the general vote of the TTC was to forward it to the board as it's currently written. So just take that in mind. I think the question that we have is we don't want to lose access to the funding by, at this point, making a false step on how it's described within the FTIP. I think it may be good to hear from Nick and Carl as to in their experience, is there a way that we can finesse this a little bit so that, we understand John's concerns, we understand the origin of the money concerns. But on the other hand, we need to get the money into the FTIP, schedule it so it can be spent. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think, we can try to maximize flexibility in terms of location, but the fact of the matter is that the funding is Nevada funding that needs to be spent in Nevada. And so we just want to reflect that appropriately in the TIP and make sure that, we, like John said, we do have access to that funding. So I think, there's a lot on the record here in terms of the concerns and the recognition about all of the coordination and planning work that is going on around transit, and the fact that transit does not stop at state lines in the South Shore. It does serve both sides, and both local governments and TTD are all working together right now, including the South Shore TMA, in investigating what does that operational system look like. And then that is coupled with, so it's actually perfect timing for this planning for a maintenance facility for the vehicles to then support that operational system. So hopefully we can move forward today and with the comments definitely noted.
Just one thing. I mean, I realize that actually $2 million is a drop in the bucket for a facility of this type. And so if this were $2 billion, it would be obviously a different discussion. But knowing that, especially with microtransit and potentially larger buses, we'll probably need a couple of locations. So from that perspective, I think it's important to just take the funding and think about what Mr. Settlemeyer said too, that we should go to the California congressionals with a broader vision for all of this. And so, I think we can, well, I know that I at least can support it as is. And I would love that we express the narrative as being broader in terms of the way we service the community in the long term. And that this is sort of a not step one, but one of the pieces in that broader vision.
Julie, you wanted to add something?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to thank the committee for this discussion. I just wanted Member Friedrich to know your comments are noted. But one thing to add into your consideration is really the hard work that the Basin Partnership is doing with our congressional delegation to fight in Washington for any congressionally designated spending. And so we want to make sure we do our part to make those monies available. And there is work to be done, into the final outcome. But I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge our congressional delegation for fighting for Tahoe. And this is a good example of our success as a partnership, but more work to do, but your comments are duly noted.
Thank you. If it's a pleasure of the committee, I think we want to move on to public comment so that we can get through our agenda. And we will have another opportunity for committee member comment at the conclusion of the public comment period. So just as a reminder, I think we had members of the public join us in the last few minutes. If you wish to speak on this item, please fill out a card. And also we're going to try to establish a queue line if we have several commenters so that we can try to run through this as efficiently as we can. So with that, if there's someone from the public that wishes to speak, please come up to the podium.
Steve Dolan, representing Friends of Third Creek, and maybe Incline Village. First, thank you for listening to a 7-year dialogue about having the Spooner area considered for parking coming in. A little disturbing related to that is taking the parking or transferring the parking from Sand Harbor, which has been a battle since they decided to enforce no parking on the Highway 28. And they moved that parking into Incline, where it has trashed our interior neighborhoods and our exterior neighborhoods. Regarding the transportation facility, fleet facility, as an organization to protect the lake, I can't imagine that you would want to have all of those vehicles being managed with their grime and their gas and their oil in the basin. So Douglas County sounds reasonable, and Carson City is where half of our workforce fleet comes from. They already drive over the mountain to get to Incline to work, both in housing and building and any number of things. So I would say that that's really the best place for this fleet hub, just to protect the lake, if nothing else. You'd rather have everybody going there. And it's fairly close to South Shore, which really needs it. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item from the public? Okay, if not, then we'll move to any online comments. And if you are online and wish to comment on this item, please raise your hand, or if you're on the telephone, dial *9. Catherine?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 2 hands up online. Steve Teixeira, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the committee. This is Steve Teixeira. My company is Sustainable Community Advocates. I appreciate the discussion. However, I think we've gone a little far afield as to what the action item is before you today, which is to amend the FTIP to allow projects that have federal funding into the regional transportation plan through the federal process. So we've gotten a little bit far afield from that. Let me put the comments that Executive Director Reagan made in a slightly different context. We have this funding, the $2 million for the facility, potentially in Douglas County, from Congressman Amadei. And we did work very closely with the congressman on the issue. And if we start making changes to congressionally designated funds that are delivered to Tahoe, I think we undermine our work with Congress and our delegation to bring those funds to Tahoe. There is a number of other advantages to the Douglas County site, which haven't been brought up this morning. I won't go into that now because I don't want to run afield of the agenda item before you, but I encourage the committee today to unanimously adopt the program that's been presented by staff as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, Catherine?
Yes, Madam Chair, there's one more hand up. On Zoom, your name is Andy. Andy, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Great, thank you. Andy Chapman, President, CEO of Travel North Tahoe, Nevada, and the TTD Board Representative for the Tahoe North Trucking North Tahoe Transportation Management Association. It's been a great conversation regarding this. We had a very similar conversation at the TTD board as well. And it was recognized, and I heard a few comments that multiple facilities are going to be needed around this lake as we look to deal with the transportation issues and the opportunities that will be with us. This site could and would service both South Shore and the Tahoe East Shore, which includes the East Shore Express facilities that the TTD operates and the Tahoe Washoe area. I do encourage the committee to recommend this amended FTIP for full approval and appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment on this item.
Thank you. So now that we've heard all the public comments, we will look to additional comments from committee members. Mr. Rice?
Madam Chair, I'm ready to make a motion.
Yep.
I could make question or comment after the motion, but I still have something.
Sure. Let's go ahead with it.
All right, Madam Chair, I move that we approve the 2023 Federal Transportation Improvement Program Amendment number 1 as presented.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Wes, I just wanted to clarify that's a recommendation to the TMPO governing board, not that this committee approves it.
So amended.
Thank you.
I comment, yes. So on this, just on the TTD fleet and facility, I mean, in just kind of in consideration of comments, again, I mean, I appreciate the work that's gone in to get this earmark, and it's good to have funds coming to the basin, and I'm all for like infrastructure to support buses, and I appreciate Douglas County's willingness to explore this. It's really not about any of those issues. It's about how this fits in with what makes sense, or where you should house buses and where you should charge them or put fuel in them or whatever fuel or electrons you're using at the time. And it's going to increasingly be electric or hydrogen, right? And so it doesn't necessarily, and the way it's written here is to say to service 75 buses, which presumably is not just the East Shore buses or the regional buses, but it's all the buses, including the ones that would be traveling, 20 miles round trip to the Y. And so to me, it's still, it seems like this plan should have been hatched first, and then you go to congressional representatives and say, here's our plan. We're going to service all the buses over here on Warrior Way. Could you please give us money, as opposed to let's get the money and now make it work before the plan is done. So I guess one question is, if we were to remove this one item until, like you mentioned, Mr. Hasty coming back in June, or saying how this facility could fit in with a multiple node facilities, right? You could charge some at the Y or the college, some in Warrior Way, depending on how that's structured. Is there a way we could pull this item to see how it fits in with the overall work plan and kind of amend the language as needed about the total number of buses, and whether this is the one and only facility envisioned or one of several, without jeopardizing the earmark that's already been made? If you were to like pull this out and then come back on this one item in next meeting, or in June or whatever.
And maybe if I could add to that question, that for clarification purposes, that it seems that even if we postpone this for a month or two, if we're really concerned with the alignment of all the planning processes that are going on, I don't know that we'll have any different information in June, John, to make an informed recommendation based on what may be happening on mobility hubs for any other location. Because that's my concern.
Well,
so if the staff can
and we
address
could
that
come back,
issue.
as mentioned, with an amendment to that description, as we said, like that does happen in the process.
Well, we could amend it now, could we not? Or
Yeah, I think like I've stated before, staff's recommending we move forward with how it's presented. I think it's important to expeditiously program these funds just from optics in terms of making sure that we are recognizing that we are moving forward with programming the congressionally designated spending. I think I would hate for this discussion to undermine the significant partnership that's occurring right now on the planning. I think that, you know, if we were to amend or remove this now, I believe that sends the wrong message to the partnership that is advancing what you're talking about in terms of multiple locations, what is the operational strategy, and what makes sense. The funding that we're talking about here, this $2 million, is not going to be spent right away. As Michelle said, we can come back later and amend this project to better and more consistently reflect what comes out of the planning process. But for now, we need to make sure we secure this funding and move forward with this amendment.
Thank you, staff. So we do have a motion on the table. Can we move forward or?
Well, I just want to say that I still have qualms with proceeding with something. We're putting the cart before the horse, and you know, we're kind of committing to a certain direction before the planning has been completed, and we haven't defined how this fits into the overall plan. So to me, it's just backwards planning. You should the plan first, then get the funds for what's agreed upon and how, you know, how a certain facility fits in to that plan. And it could well be that this is an important piece of it, but as it's described, it's not saying that it's committing to the one and only facility, which again, to me is problematic without that context. And so it would be helpful. You know, I would certainly, I like all the other projects. This could be an important part of, you know, you got to service buses. We need buses. You know, it's great that with this money was, you know, committed for that purpose, but I'm not sure it's the right, you know, solution for the overall package of bus charging and maintenance needs that we're going to have in the future. And we have a lot of things in motion about what that's going to look like. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion. Are we ready for roll call? Hey, Mariah?
Ms. Conrad Seda,
Yes.
Mr. Rice,
Yes.
Mr. Friedrich,
Nope.
Mr. Settlemyer.
Yes.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Faustinos.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, we'll now move on to agenda item number 5, which is to recommend approval of the 2023 Regional Grant Program briefing and adoption of the Active Transportation Program Metropolitan Planning Organization Program project. Information on this item can be found on page 295 of your packet. And I believe we're passing this also to Judy for the presentation.
Okay, so hello again. So we are transitioning from programming of the funds to awarding of the funds. So today it'll be a brief overview of the regional grant program, the 2023 project recommendations, and then an action to adopt the Active Transportation Program MPO project recommendations. The ATP funding is a funding source within the regional grant program and requires specific board adoption. Okay, so as the MPO, we are responsible for allocating and tracking various federal and state funding programs. The regional grant program allocates the region's federal and state funds to protect and support regional goals through a competitive process. This project began back in 2017 to streamline the increased federal funding that came with our large MPO designation through the FAST Act. The program's goal was to be efficient in administering these funds by creating alignment with all the funding sources, instead of having one-off funding cycles for each program as we had done in the past. To date, we have awarded $43 million through this program. So today the program has definitely evolved, improving the process for the applicant and for staff. We bundled multiple transportation funding sources into one program that awards projects every 2 years. This leverages the funds to increase success and effectiveness of project implementation. We have also updated the project application based on applicant feedback and have fine-tuned the performance assessment within each cycle. Also, the program now sets to prioritize projects that benefit transportation disadvantaged and historically marginalized communities. The focus is to implement the regional transportation plan by creating additional transportation options and an enhanced performance system to provide safe multimodal improvements that deliver social and environmental benefits. It also advances the implementation of the regional and local transportation priorities, along with the RTP goals and policies, and this is done through a competitive process. As the MPO, we are administering this program every 2 years, and the program is available to transportation projects within the MPO region. And this past November, we did release the 2023 call for projects. Next slide. So the 2023 call had an estimated budget of about $14.9 million. It included 5 funding sources, 4 of them that were federal. First one was the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program. This focuses on projects that improve air quality and reduce emissions. The Carbon Reduction Program, this is the new source for us and to the Regional Grant Program. It provides funds to protect, it provides funds to projects that decrease transportation emissions from an on-road highway resource. The Surface Transportation Block Grant provides flexible funding for highway, transit, and bicycle and ped improvements projects. The Nevada Transportation Alternatives Program funds projects that improve safety, alternative travel modes, and also enhances the transportation experience. We did include or had one state program included, and that is the Active Transportation Program, which are MPO allocations. And this focuses on active transportation. This source, again, requires a board resolution, and it also requires approval from the California Transportation Commission. So today, we are only recommending funds for the California projects. And we are working with the Nevada partners to bring back the Nevada funding and projects later this year. Next slide, please. So in total, we received 14 applications for the call. $38.7 million in funding requests. We used a cross-department review team to evaluate the applications. The project criteria in the guidelines was developed or is developed every cycle to better reflect the RTP goals and transportation needs, and in the future, the biennial performance report. These evaluators scored the applications based on an initial screening and also the criteria that was established within the guidelines. The project recommendations were released to the public on February 24th. And the Tahoe Transportation Implementation Committee, and this is comprised of local transportation partners, Caltrans and NDOT, were convened shortly after the project recommendations were released. And staff reviewed the selection process details. We answered questions and solicited feedback on the recommendations, and the committee had consensus on these projects and also endorsed the project selections. Next slide. So here's a snapshot of the project recommendations. The team was able to recommend 7 projects totaling $11.1 million. We were able to fully fund 5 project requests, 1 partly through construction, and then 1 project through right-of-way. The 2 projects that are in bold are recommended for the Active Transportation Program funds, again, which requires a separate board action, and I will be coming back to that soon. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through each of these projects. So next slide, please. So this map displays the projects. And again, just as a reminder, these are the California recommendations only. Nevada projects to come forth later. So in Placer County, Kings Beach Western Approach, this is shown in brown on the map. We fully funded right away at $1.5 million. This is located at SR 267 and 28. It conducts a roundabout, new sidewalks, improved lighting, and bicycle lanes. There are two projects in El Dorado County. First one is the Apache Avenue Pedestrian Safety and Connectivity Project. This is in the kind of olive green color. Fully funded construction for this project at $1.7 million. It is located in Myers, a complete street project with a shared use path, bike lanes, and curb and gutter improvements. The second El Dorado project is Pioneer Trail at US 50 intersection. It's a roundabout. It's shown in purple on the map. We were able to fully fund construction at $3.6 million. Again, it's located in Myers and it converts the intersection to a roundabout with shared use paths, crosswalks, and buffer islands. There are two cities, City of South Lake Tahoe projects. The first one, Pioneer Trail Pedestrian Improvement Project. This is phase 2. This is shown in blue. We fully funded construction at $1.2 million. And this is a continuation of sidewalks, bus shelters, and the bike and ped safety improvements along Pioneer Trail, and it reaches from Larch to Ski Run Boulevard. The second project was a microtransit EV charging base station. This is shown in orange. We fully funded construction here at about $270,000. It is located at the city's D Street facility and includes infrastructure for 4 level 2 chargers under a solar canopy. The other project in Placer County is the North Tahoe Shared Use Trail. This is in dark green. We were able to fully fund this for construction at $1.8 million. And this is a 2.5 miles of shared use path in Tahoe Vista at the North Tahoe Regional Park to Carnelian Bay Avenue. And the last project is the TTD Free to the User Transit Program. This is shown in the red color. And we fully funded this request of $1 million. And these monies will provide free fare transit for 2024 and 2025 within the El Dorado County and the city of South Lake Tahoe. So next slide, please. So the next steps for the regional grant program. The recommended projects will be updated in the EIP tracker, transportation tracker, and then programmed into the Federal Transportation Improvement Program through subsequential actions. Again, once programmed in the FTIP, it allows for the implementer to move forward with authorization of funds and the work to begin. You also may see a few of these projects come back here in FTIP project in the upcoming months. For the two projects that received the Active Transportation Program funds, the ATP funds, the Apache Avenue Pedestrian Safety and Connectivity Project and the Pioneer Trail Pedestrian Improvement Project, these recommendations do require a board resolution, which is the action today, and a final approval from the California Transportation Commission. And that approval is scheduled for their June board meeting. And then with the final commission approval, these projects will be updated in the tracker and then programmed into the FTIP. And we will continue to work with the Nevada projects on the Nevada funding and recommending projects. And we may come back later this year with recommendations. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that presentation, Judy. Do we have any comments from committee members? Looking around.
I'll just say that, you know, we get accused of piecemealing a lot here. And when I see something like this, where you can see them all together and see the big difference they're going to make in the basin, I really appreciate that. So thank you so much. And I'm just really glad to see this type of funding going to making the basin cleaner, more livable, and easier to move around without cars. So thanks for the presentation.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Madam Chair, thank you. Julie Reagan, TRPA Executive Director. Just again, thank you, Member Ashley Conrad Seda, for bringing that up about the totality of it. This action is really limited to this resolution for the active transportation 2 projects. And just for the benefit of the of the public, we're not asking you to take action on these other projects. They're in different processes. But the key message here with this regional grants program, and we wanted to show it to you more holistically in this presentation, was that we are getting these funds as a result of being dubbed a larger MPO than a small rural MPO. And of course, again, back to the partnership and all the stakeholders that work with our congressional delegation. Several years ago, we were able to be bumped out of that rural category into a population of more than 200,000 people, which brought millions, anywhere, from $5 to $8 million more per year. And this is what is being funded with those projects. So we've moved out of just simple planning MPO funding from the federal government into some implementation dollars. And that was a direct result of the work of the partnership in the basin to advocate for transportation. And we have a long way to go. This is not even close to what's needed, which is the next item on the agenda. But I just wanted to give the context for you as board members and for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And again, just great work on the part of staff to get this moving so quickly. So if there are no more comments from committee members, we will move on to the public comment portion on the agenda. So any members of the public here in the room that wish to speak, if you could go ahead and queue up, they're close to the podium. Doesn't look like we have any takers there. So Catherine, do we have anyone online? And for those people that are online, if you do wish to speak, please raise your hand in the Zoom screen, or if you're on the telephone, hit *9.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have one hand raised online. Steve Teixeira, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Thank you. Good morning again, members of the committee. Steve Teixeira, Sustainable Community Advocates. I'm familiar with every one of these projects and urge the committee today to take the action recommended for your consideration by staff. Thank you.
Any further comments, Catherine?
Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment on this item.
Okay, great. Well, now I will entertain a motion on this item.
I'll make the motion. I move we recommend TMPO Governing Board adoption of the attachment A resolution 2023 approving the active transportation program Metropolitan Planning Organization program of projects.
Okay, any comments before we go to a vote? All right, Mariah, please take a roll call.
Mr. Rice,
Yes.
Ms. Conrad Seda,
Yes.
Mr. Settlemyre, Mr. Friedrich,
Yes.
Ms. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Faustinos.
Yes.
Madam Chair, motion passes.
Okay, now we'll move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the transportation funding update. And information on this item can be found on page 613 of your packet. And I'll tee it up to Julie so that she can give us an overview.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Reagan, TRPA Executive Director. I'm just going to do a brief introduction. And this is information only. We could easily have a whole workshop on this discussion. And I just wanted to note, we wanted to plant the seed to come back to you later, but give you a very important update on this idea of a shared funding commitment to transportation, per our last discussion, and give you a little bit of historical context for what is called the bi-state consultation on transportation. The idea for that really came out of a governing board retreat, and we'll, I'm sure, be having these kinds of conversations tomorrow with the governing board and the strategic planning session. But the idea for both states to work together to elevate the role of transportation at the state level, federal level, and into the community, and to come to some alignment and consensus around what are the highest priorities for transportation. So a report was, you've all been given a copy of this, but a report was published in the first phase of work. And at the time, it was Secretary of California Natural Resources Agency, John Laird, who's now in the state Senate, and Leo Drozdoff, and then replaced by Bradley Kroll, his counterpart as the Director of Conservation and Natural Resources in Nevada. And we published this report, and then subsequent to this report, we continued meeting to keep honing this, and has now formed the Transportation Action Plan, which was referenced earlier. And so the breakthrough really was getting agreement on those regionally significant projects, breaking down the basin into corridors. We actually even had signed MOUs in this document around corridor planning from law enforcement, from local governments, from the state DOTs, TRPA, and many, many other partners, land managers. And so then that has evolved into, okay, we've got agreement on the projects. How are we going to pay for them? Because Tahoe has struggled mightily. I'm cleaning out my office and I'm finding documents from 20 years ago that say exactly, we need more money for transportation. And we always have. And we're actually doing something about it now with this strategy. And Nick Haven is going to give you an update. I will mention, since those bi-state consultation conversations, this board adopted a new VMT standard for sustainable communities and VMT reduction. And now that is also tied into this work. And at the end of this calendar year, we do have a milestone to hit to show progress on this sustainable funding. More to come on that, but I wanted to flag that for you because the stakes have always been high on transportation in the basin. They are even higher now with our new VMT standard that we must show progress on. So I just wanted to lay the foundation and let you know we are so pleased with the momentum that we have been having around this, and the progress is evident. So I will turn that over to Nick Haven.
Thank you very much, Julie. Nick Haven, Transportation Manager for the record. Yeah, so great tee up from Julie. I think we've been working on transportation funding, obviously for decades, but in more earnest over the last 4 years or so. The bi-state consultation was definitely a great catalyst for the region in terms of creating some alignment around transportation. As you heard from the discussion today, transportation is kind of tough, and funding and everything is definitely challenging. Challenging to keep up with, challenging to track and communicate. And so we are forging a new established partnership that is growing momentum around aligning around transportation solutions, aligning around funding to implement those solutions. And that was a big outcome, I think, out of the bi-state, that now we are kind of working on that regionally. There's other groups that have now been definitely engaged, and I've listed those on the slide. I know it's kind of hard to read, but you know, this committee in the past has been very active. The TRPA board, the TTD board, from a policy and direction standpoint of engaging and raising the profile of transportation, and been very successful in that. As well as the formation of the Tahoe Transportation Implementation Committee, which is a more nuts and bolts group made up of like public works directors, state DOTs. And that's really where we can move and advance a true alignment around implementation. And then that can translate into being more successful on funding and funding pursuits. And so this slide is really just looking at the progression that we've had over the last few years in terms of creating that alignment around transportation and commonality around goals. Then we're looking at aligning solutions and identifying specific solutions. And that's where the Transportation Action Plan comes in, and very specific call outs of regional priorities. And then there's also now what new funding do we really need to get this on the ground? And the new is kind of the key word there. Above and beyond what's already anticipated in the RTP, what do we need to attract in terms of new beyond what was expected? Next slide, please. And I know we're running a little slow on time, but and I'm going to move through this pretty quickly. But as Julie said, we plan essentially a quarterly check-in and discussion with this committee. So this will not be the only opportunity. I just want to put that out there. And so that alignment, it's important to note that alignment on transportation spans from TRPA's responsibility to produce a very long-range, high-level regional transportation plan and vision, all the way to the far right and lining that up with local governments and local priorities. And that's culminated in the center there with the Transportation Action Plan. And you could even slot the FTIP that we discussed earlier right in the middle there as well, being that nearer term implementation strategy. And so this is just illustrating, you know, how this is all interconnected, right? We're all working together toward a common goal. Next slide. And so the solutions that begin to come out of this work obviously is driving toward the goals in the RTP. And so it is of note is the vehicle miles traveled new threshold that Julie mentioned. There's some triggers there that we're mindful of, but there's many other goals as well that our solutions are targeting, right? Improving safety, improving connectivity and congestion. And so we want to make note that our alignment is obviously couched within attainment of these goals. Next slide. And so how do we do that? The funding initiative really zeroed in on a $20 million plus annual gap that we needed to generate new revenue for. And this is in addition to the balance of the regional transportation plan, which is a sizable program annually. It's over $80 million. And so the shared 777 funding approach was an outcome kind of that consultation process. And that was a pivot from what was initially a look at, more of a regional ongoing sustainable source or sources, which is still a long-term goal. I think that is important to state, but with the emergence of a new transportation bill that has unprecedented levels of transportation funding, the time is now to utilize this shared funding approach to go after federal and state funds, as well as emergence of new local funding that has come online. And so the worksheet in attachment A is kind of a first cut at beginning to document some of that. And again, that's a living document that'll be updated over time, but it gives you a snapshot as of April 1st in terms of what new funding is coming online that was not anticipated in the regional transportation plan. And so that's some accounting work that we're trying to do in terms of tracking and showing progress, because I think it is valuable to acknowledge the effort that is going in and that needs to be sustained in order to generate this new funding for transportation. And so with that, I think the last slide is kind of a snapshot from the table on attachment A. Kind of how are we doing in terms of the 777? And while it shows great progress, there's still a ways to go. And so we need to sustain the momentum, keep the pedal to the metal in terms of the transportation bill and other opportunities that exist out there right now. And TRPA plans to continue to support the partnership in terms of building capacity in the region for being successful in attracting a lot of the new grant funding, while also continuing to keep the door open for more sustainable long-term sources as well. So with that, I'll wrap it up and be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Well, clearly, California needs to step up to the table a little bit more. So we'll just acknowledge that right off the bat. But committee members, do you have any comments that you want to make? So yes.
Just a question. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted, and apologies if you clarified this. When we talk about the funding sources and you're reporting back, are those for one-time projects or are those actually the long-term sustainable funds? And are we reporting the differences?
Yeah, I think, when we look at, we have very limited new sustainable ongoing sources and commitments. And I think with the pivot from, that pursuit at the time for now, a lot of the funding that you're seeing is one time, but it is new money. It's in the spirit of additional funding, right? And so we want to make sure we're giving credit for that, right, to those that are seeking those funds and receiving them. And so sustainable funds are fairly limited at this point, but the funding that's shown on that table is funds that are secured and in hand. And so they're sustainable until they're not. And so, I think that's why I made the statement, like we don't want to abandon the pursuit of long-term ongoing. And I know there's a number of activities at the state level and at the federal level to continue that. But there is also current activity going on now that should be acknowledged.
Anyone else?
Can you just put that slide back up on the alignment first? Is a few back.
Yeah, it's like the second. Back to like this. That one. Oh. Sorry, Tracy, can you go to which slide? The goals? Oh, okay, the first slide.
There you go. This makes sense to me, and I hardly that. Sorry, this makes sense to me. Sorry about that. I had the wrong button pushed. And I think is it fair to say just in general, when we're seeking federal, any source of funding, where first it's agreed upon, we have alignment as in a plan, right? And then we're seeking funding as opposed to seeking funding and then making it work. So I take that from here. So I just think it's important to define when we're seeking funding for any process that we first have alignment and solutions and then seek the funding, and not seeking the funding and then trying to fit it into a plan per our previous discussion. And maybe just in general, when we're thinking of things like pursuing earmarks, what is there some benchmark by which it has to be that we have to have alignment or have to be part of a plan before we seek that funds, or what is the process by which even we're pursuing earmarks for anything in the first place?
I'll just speak a little bit to that. The regional transportation plan is sort of that overarching, and there's a ton of projects in that plan that are all needed to move us forward. The fleet facility is in that plan. And there are a lot of projects in that plan, but they haven't all been defined down to that detailed level. So just in that, in that vein, those projects are in there and they're needed. So I think it's when we have to kind of drill down and start that project planning process you're getting at. So there's alignment, those needs are there. But really that defining that project does happen through these other processes. And I think Nick was going to follow up on the rest of it.
Yeah, I think the specific pursuit of funding for projects is well coordinated, and we utilize the Tahoe Transportation Implementation Committee, as well as some of the other Tahoe Partnership and other groups from the Tahoe Interagency Executives to help coordinate those requests, whether they're congressionally designated spending requests or even competitive grant requests. That process has actually been very successful in making sure that we're not tripping over each other, so to speak, in terms of competing applications and other things, but also putting them through somewhat of a test, like you're saying, in terms of readiness and planning consistency. And so I think the thing to think about is also the timing of funding and how long it takes for federal funding and other things to come online and be ready. And so that's why I made the statement earlier, like the funding that we're programming isn't going to be spent for another 3 years. It's not programmed to be spent for 3 years. Okay, so the lead time on these things allows for a lot of planning activities to occur. And so you're not pushed up against the end time frame and trying to secure many millions, as member Conrad Seda said, these projects are expensive. It takes a lot of bites at the apple to cobble together the funding for construction, right? And so we do have that coordination going on. It's done in a number of different venues.
No, I appreciate that. And I also appreciate there are many, many great projects out there that are agreed upon, that there's kind of planning processes happen, or there's no real kind of, variables in motion. And I would just hope in the future that where we still have planning processes underway, we don't put the cart before the horse and have the funding on the top and then try to fit it into a plan. It just, again, that to me is backwards, and we should avoid that at all costs when we have so many projects that are ready to go and for which the planning is essentially done, or there's no real unknowns about how that money should be spent.
Thank you. I think we have a comment from Ms. Gustafson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Nick, I just wanted to clarify one question that was asked about sustainable, because I do think most of the local and private share is sustainable funding. And I just want the committee to know that the share that we've now achieved our goal and have supplanted is ongoing funds from the jurisdictions. I think our jurisdiction is up to almost $4 million annually out of general fund pots of money for transit and transportation funding, in addition to any state or federal funding. And I think it's important to point out that private contribution through the T-bids and through general fund contributions of the local agencies, it's really going to take that to operate a transit system. So important to note for the committee members.
Absolutely. And in times of very strained budgets at the local government level, you're all to be applauded for doing that. So thank you. If there's no further comments or questions from the committee members, we'll go to public testimony on this item, public comment rather on this item. Anyone wishing to speak, please come to the podium and identify yourself for the record. Okay. Morning.
How's that? Good morning, Doug Flaherty on behalf of TahoeCleanAir.org. I saw something about safety up there on your proposals. I first want to preface this, and I mean no disrespect, but you guys have quite a scheme going. It's taken me 6 years to figure it out. You interject your ideology projects at a low workshop committee or subcommittee level under a process called leading small groups. You can look that up on Wikipedia. Quite a little scheme. And you work those up through these committees and subcommittees to make changes, socioeconomic changes, and which actually equal degradation of the Lake Tahoe environment. You do this by creating all these grant approvals before the public has really ever voted or figured out a way within the system to approve your spending. And that includes all your EIP projects, all the transportation projects without a cumulative impact environmental analysis or a cumulative impact environmental impact statement. The 2012 regional plan EIS, when it comes to projects that you're scheming towards, is outdated. It's not relevant. You won a couple of court cases, you've been emboldened in the past, but as a Ninth Circuit judge said, he expects the controversy to continue regarding the relevance and the actions of the TRPA. Right now you're emboldened, but things can change. So I would encourage you to pause all major projects until you do a cumulative impact environmental statement, which includes a roadway by roadway wildfire evacuation assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers here in the room? Thank you.
Good morning, Gavin Feiger, on behalf of the League to Save Lake Tahoe. Thanks for taking this on. Quick reminder, a lot of you were on the governing board when the VMT threshold was approved, April of 2021. The League was one of the major stakeholders leading up to that approval, but the stakeholder group, 35 public members of the public and local jurisdictions were involved in kind of our regional transportation plan and vehicle miles traveled threshold updates as they went through together for about 2 years, 2019, 2021. The end of it, we came up with some automatic triggers and responses to make sure that we can implement the regional transportation plan, which is fundamentally the mitigation for the regional plan, right? So here we are, 2 years later, the deadline is coming up. Everybody did agree on it. at the end of this year, if, 20 million annually sustainably or forecasted sustainably is not coming in, all development will be VMT neutral in Tahoe, which is a very high bar. The event center achieved it or is on track to achieve it, but they could probably talk to you about how difficult it was. So we hope not to get there. It's really exciting to see the locals kicking in. And I think to Cindy's point there, it's true. That money is sustainable. A lot of it's going to microtransit, but that shows that there are projects out there that people want and that we can get support for. So it's encouraging. That said, we're really not on track to meet the goal this year. So just want to encourage everybody to use all your connections as the league and all of our partners are to try to get this money coming in this year. And then we'll continue to work with staff on what the definition of a sustainable funding source is, because there are a lot of nuances to it, and kind of thought about it when we were setting up the threshold, but here we are. So really need to figure it out over these next couple months. And then hopefully we can reach it by the end of this year. And if not, we're on a really solid track to reach it. Because as a reminder, that trigger for VMT neutral development, as soon as the funding source is coming in, that consequence goes away. So it's not like we have to wait another year, another 2 years to do a check. As soon as we reach that milestone, development goes back to normal for Tahoe, what we have right now. So again, thanks for the good work and sticking with it. And let's make it happen this year or as quick as possible. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in the room? Okay, I think we can go on to virtual comments. So for those of you that are on Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're on the telephone, please hit *9. Catherine, do we have anyone lined up?
Madam Chair, we have one hand raised online. Ann Nichols, if you unmute, you can address the committee.
Yeah, good morning. Ann Nichols, North Tahoe Preservation Alliance. What's scary about all this is you've all decided how this is all going to work, and there's 120 projects, and the public is going to be responsible for all the transit. But how is the public going to be responsible? How are you going to decide to get this money? Where did you get the 7 million you say you already have? What are the benchmarks? Who's going to oversee it? Who's going to spend the money? TRPA? I don't know. The 777 plan is deeply flawed. It's vague. We've written on this, and you're not doing anything, and you're not being transparent. The 120 projects all attract more people. They do not solve the transportation issues. More trails, more attractions. How is this going to help? So we need you guys to tell us how you're doing this. Have public presentations about this 7-7 plan so we could tell you how badly written it is. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional speakers?
No, Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment on this item.
Okay, then we will close public testimony on this item. Sorry, final comments from members of the committee. Okay, then we will move on to the next item, which is to agenda item 7 with upcoming topics. And this item is also informational only. So Kim, I believe you were going to do a little briefing on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kim Chevalier for the record. I can be really quick. Upcoming, we have a couple different things. We want to do an update on environmental improvement projects that are coming this summer, and including bringing an update on MOU implementation from our partners. And so we'll be working on some of the restoration projects and potentially a field visit in the future so we can see some of those. And we'll continue to provide quarterly updates on the 777 strategy. Thanks.
Thank you to staff. So we'll go to a public comment period on this item. Do we have any members in the audience here that would like to speak? If not, we'll go to our virtual opportunities. Those of you on Zoom, raise your hand in the Zoom room or hit *9 if you're on the telephone. Do we have anyone, Catherine?
Madam Chair, we do not have any hands raised to comment on this item.
Okay, then we'll close public testimony on this item. And let me see here, where I lost track of where I'm at.
Madam
Do you have
Chair,
any-
may
Yes.
I, while you're looking, Julie Reagan, TRPA Executive Director, I just want to thank the committee for this great discussion and Also say to the committee, Judy Weber, this is her first time addressing the committee, and Judy is a longtime transportation planner at TRPA and knows that FTIP inside and out better than anyone. So Judy did a great job. So I just wanted to make that on the record. Thank you.
Absolutely. Staff did a tremendous job and we all appreciate how much they do for us. Okay, if we have no further comments from members of the committee, we'll move on to just general item number 8, committee member comments. Does anyone wish to bring something up? Suggestion for future meetings? No? Okay, then we'll go to our last public interest comment item on the agenda. And this is where you can provide comments on any items that were not on the agenda. So if you'd like to come up now, please do so.
Steve Dolan, Friends of Third Creek, Incline Village. In this discussion, this board has talked a lot about transportation funding. And I participate or spoke in opposition to bills AB 424 and ACR 5 when they were presented. I'm sorry. But I did not do that because of anything wrong with TRPA. What is wrong is that the TRPA, according to former Executive Director Emeritus Marchetta, is that there's a MOU, memoranda of understanding between the TRPA and the Lake Tahoe Basin Management of the unit of the U.S. Forest Service, which prevents the TRPA from enforcing best management practices. I have here the evidence that I mentioned down at the assembly in a PowerPoint. If I can get your business cards, I'll give it to you via email if you're interested. It will be going to many places. I really would like to see the TRPA be able to enforce these things, because just at Incline Village and the Incline Lake Dam Removal Project for the U.S. Forest Service, I documented for Director Marchetta unmitigated dust, no filter fencings, no wattles, no ponds to hold when they divert the thing. Then they got a letter based on our information from the NDOW protesting the siphoning and pumping of water from the creeks and the streams and the ponds in the meadow up there that has been created by the removal of the dam. So there's a lot going on, and they are the #1 violator of best management practices for the basin. And TRPA doesn't have the power to go after them for that. I think there are back doors open possibly, but that's not what you need. And so I'm here to inform you that I am trying to get the TRPA the authority to manage the basin with the Federal Forest Service. Thank you. If you would like one of these PowerPoints, I sure probably Executive Director Reagan and I will be looking at it, I hope. And it's available for anyone in the public government. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional speakers?
Doug Flaherty on behalf of Tahoe CleanAir.org. Just wondering why the TRPA has not taken one of its main government partners to task on their, which is the U.S. Forest Service, to task on their intentional practice of wildfire growth for forest resource purposes. The Tamarack fire, the Caldor fire, the Dixie fire, and on and on and on for the last several years has deposited enormous amounts of phosphorus, nitrogen, and sediment into the waters of Lake Tahoe, which are impaired under the Clean Water Act. Yet the TRPA sits silently while our citizens, our wildlife, our air quality, our water is degraded. Many lawsuits in play right now regarding the U.S. Forest Service purposeful use of wildfire. Not a word from you guys. Amazing. The UC Davis State of the Lake report cites specifically 5 wildfires just in the last 2 years that has significantly degraded Lake Tahoe and deposited phosphorus, nitrogen, carbon black, and settlement in the lake. Where's the TRPA been on this? Oh, they're one of our partners. You guys have to take note of this and enforce your own rules along with the Lahontan Water District and put a stop to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments here in the room? If not, we'll go to our virtual platforms. Anyone on Zoom, please raise your hand. Those on the phone, *9. Any speakers, Catherine?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to comment on this item.
Great, thank you. So we're where we need a motion to close this meeting.
So moved.
Okay, and now the governing board meeting will start in 5 minutes. All right.